It's true, everything Marcus suspects. Caleb Ward stands before the ranch boss, confessing forbidden love that once cost a man his life. His massive frame trembles, not with fear, but defiance. The boy he saved watches, horrified. One word from Holloway means hanging or mercy. Before we dive in, comment where in the world you are watching from and don't forget to click subscribe. The dust had barely settled when Caleb first saw him. The new ranch hand stood in the barn's entrance, silhouetted against the burning orange of a prairie sunset, and everything about him was wrong for this land. Too clean, too soft, too green for a place that ate weak men alive and spat out their bones. Caleb straightened from where he'd been checking the horse's hoof, his massive frame unfolding like a mountain rising from the earth. 6'7" of sun-darkened muscle and weathered leather, hands that could snap fence posts, and a presence that made grown men step back without knowing why. The boy, because that's all he could be with those wide eyes and trembling hands, couldn't have been more than 19, 20 at most. His shirt hung loose on narrow shoulders, sleeves rolled up to reveal pale forearms that had never known real labor. City arms, soft arms. "You the one boss hired?" Caleb's voice came out rougher than he intended. Gravel scraped over stone. "Yes, sir. I'm Jamie Cordell." The voice matched the rest of him, uncertain, unformed. "I'm here to learn ranching, to what? Play cowboy for a summer before running back to whatever soft life you crawled out of?" The words landed hard, and Caleb watched color flood the boy's face. Shame, maybe, or anger? It was hard to tell in the dying light. "I need this work, sir. I'll do whatever you ask. I'm a fast learner, I promise." Something in the desperate sincerity made Caleb's jaw tighten. The foreman had warned him. New hand, completely green, needed breaking in, needed teaching. But looking at this slip of a thing with his two bright eyes and trembling determination, Caleb felt something stir in his chest that had nothing to do with teaching. "Can you even lift a hay bale?" I can try, sir." "Trying ain't doing, boy. Out here you either can or you can't. There's no middle ground." Jamie's chin lifted, just barely, a spark of defiance breaking through the fear. "Then I can, sir. I will." Caleb moved closer, each step deliberate, watching the way Jamie's breath caught, the way his hands clenched at his sides. The boy didn't step back, even when Caleb towered over him, casting him completely in shadow. "You sure about that? Sure you can handle what this ranch demands?" "What I demand." Up close, he could see the freckles scattered across Jamie's nose, the way his throat worked as he swallowed. The scent of cheap soap and fear sweat mixed with something sweeter, something that made Caleb's hands itch to reach out, and he stepped back sharply. "Bunkhouse is that way. You start at dawn. Don't be late." That first night, Caleb lay awake in his cabin, listening to the wind howl through the canyon. He told himself the restlessness churning in his gut was annoyance. Just another greenhorn who'd wash out within a week. Nothing more. But when dawn broke and he walked to the barn, some part of him was already searching the shadows, already looking for that uncertain silhouette. Jamie was there, early even, standing by the fence, watching the sunrise paint the mountains gold and crimson. He'd changed into work clothes that hung even looser than yesterday's shirt, making him look impossibly young, impossibly fragile. "Morning, sir," Jamie said quietly, not quite meeting his eyes. Caleb grunted, grabbing 2 sets of gloves from the hook. He tossed one pair to Jamie, who fumbled the catch but managed to hold on. "Today you learn fencing. We're replacing the north line. It's hard work, hot work. If you can't keep up, I'll keep up." The determination in those 3 words made something warm unfurl in Caleb's chest. Dangerous, distracting. "We'll see." They worked in silence for the first hour, Caleb showing Jamie how to dig post holes, how to stretch wire without cutting yourself open. The boy struggled with every task, his soft hands already blistering, sweat soaking through his shirt. But he didn't complain, didn't ask for breaks. By midday, the sun was merciless, turning the prairie into a furnace. Caleb watched Jamie wipe his face with his sleeve, leaving dirt streaks across those pale cheekbones, The shirt clung to narrow shoulders, outlining every lean line of muscle that was already starting to show beneath the softness. "Water," Caleb said gruffly, pulling the canteen from his belt. "Drink." Jamie reached for it, fingers brushing against Caleb's palm. The contact was brief, accidental, but it sent electricity racing up Caleb's arm. Jamie jerked back like he'd been burned, nearly dropping the canteen. "Sorry, Just drink, boy." He watched Jamie's throat work as he swallowed, watched a drop of water escape and trail down his neck, disappearing beneath his collar. Caleb forced his eyes away, busying himself with the next post. But the awareness remained. Every time Jamie moved, every soft sound of effort, every time those uncertain eyes found him and quickly looked away. By sunset, they'd replaced a quarter-mile of fence. Jamie's hands were raw and bleeding, his shoulders shaking with exhaustion. But he'd kept up. Barely, but he'd done it. "Tomorrow," Caleb said as they walked back toward the barn, "we start earlier, cover more ground." Jamie nodded, too tired for words. "And boy," Caleb stopped, forcing himself to look at those exhausted eyes. "You did adequate work today, for a first day." The smile that bloomed across Jamie's face was like sunrise breaking over the mountains. Pure, unguarded, beautiful. Caleb turned away before he could do something stupid, before he could acknowledge the way his heart had stumbled at that smile. Just a greenhorn, he told himself. Just another hand who'd be gone before winter. But as he lay in his bunk that night, all he could see was the way sweat had made Jamie's shirt cling to his body, the way determination had burned brighter than fear in those eyes, the way his own name had sounded in that soft, uncertain voice. Dawn would come too soon, and not soon enough. The days bled together in a rhythm of labor and longing that Caleb had never known before. Each morning, Jamie appeared earlier, more eager, his soft city hands growing calloused and sure. Each evening, Caleb found new reasons to keep them working past sunset, unwilling to release this fragile spell that had settled over them. "You're pushing him too hard," the foreman said one night, voice heavy with warning. "Boy's about to break. He can handle it." Can he? Or do you just want him to? Caleb didn't answer, because he didn't know which truth was more dangerous. By the second week, Jamie's shirts no longer hung loose. Muscle had begun to replace softness, his shoulders broader, his movements more confident. But he still watched Caleb with those uncertain eyes, still jumped when their hands accidentally touched, still colored when Caleb's voice dropped low with instruction. "You're gripping it wrong," Caleb said, moving behind Jamie as he struggled with an axe. "Here." He reached around, his chest against Jamie's back, his hands covering the boys on the axe handle. Jamie went completely still, his breathing shallow and quick. "Relax," Caleb murmured against his ear. "Tension makes you weak. You need to let the weight do the work." He guided Jamie's swing, feeling every tremor that ran through that lean body, feeling the way Jamie's breath caught when Caleb's stubbled jaw brushed his neck. The axe bit deep into the wood. Perfect strike. "Like that," Caleb said, his voice rougher than the instruction warranted. "Feel it?" "Yes, sir," Jamie whispered. "I feel it." Caleb stepped back quickly, putting distance between them. Necessary distance, safe distance. But that night, alone in his cabin, all he could think about was the way Jamie had fit against him, the way his body had responded to every touch, the way his voice had shaken on those 3 words. The third week brought storms. Black clouds rolled in from the mountains, bringing lightning that split the sky and thunder that shook the barn's foundation. The horses were restless, spooked, and when Jamie went to calm them, Caleb followed without thinking. He found the boy in the last stall, hands gentle on a mare's neck, voice soft with reassurance. The lightning flashed, illuminating his profile in stark relief, beautiful and fierce and completely unaware of his own power. "She trusts you," Caleb said from the shadows. Jamie turned, eyes wide. "You startled me." "Sorry." He moved closer, drawn like iron to lodestone. "You have a gift with them, the horses. My grandmother kept horses. Before she died, she taught me—" His voice broke off. "She was the only one who believed I could make something of myself out here." "And now?" Caleb asked, standing so close he could see the gold flecks in Jamie's eyes. Do you believe it? I don't know what I believe anymore, sir. Jamie's gaze dropped to Caleb's mouth, then away. Everything is different than I expected. Harder, but also. Thunder crashed, and the mare reared. Jamie stumbled backward, directly into Caleb's arms. For a heartbeat, they stood frozen, Caleb's hands on Jamie's waist, Jamie's back pressed against Caleb's chest. Also what? Caleb asked, his voice barely above a whisper. Also better, Jamie breathed, in ways I don't understand. The rain started then, drumming on the roof, drowning out everything except the thunder of Caleb's heart. He should step back, should release this boy and walk away before they crossed a line that couldn't be uncrossed. Instead, his hands tightened on Jamie's waist. You should go to the bunkhouse, Caleb said, before the storm gets worse. Jamie turned in his arms, looking up at him with eyes that held no uncertainty now. Only want. Only heat. What if I don't want to go? The question hung between them, heavy with promise and danger. Caleb's resolve, already cracking, shattered completely. Then stay, he said, voice rough with need. Stay and let me show you everything you came here to learn. Outside, the storm raged. Inside the barn, something else ignited. Something that had been building since that first sunset, since the first time their eyes had met. Jamie's hand found Caleb's chest, fingers spreading over his heart. I'm afraid, he admitted. I don't know how. I know. Caleb covered Jamie's hand with his own. I know what you are, what you need, and I'm going to give it to you. Every lesson, every moment, until you understand exactly what you're capable of becoming. The promise in those words made Jamie tremble, but not with fear, with anticipation, with yearning that had been building for weeks. Please, Jamie whispered, teach me. And in the darkness of the storm-wrapped barn, with rain drumming overhead and lightning illuminating stolen moments, Caleb began the most important lesson of all, not with cruelty or haste, but with patience, with reverence, with hands that could break but chose instead to worship, with words that guided and praised and demanded everything Jamie had to give. The night stretched long and deep, filled with discoveries that rewrote everything both men thought they knew about themselves. About desire, about connection, about the kind of hunger that transcends flesh and touches something deeper. When dawn finally broke, the storm had passed. The prairie was washed clean, glistening with possibility. And in the barn, two men stood close, breathing the same air, forever changed by the night that had passed between them. Jamie's eyes met Caleb's, no longer uncertain, no longer afraid. Again, he whispered, show me again. And Caleb, who had never been a gentle man, found gentleness, found patience, found in this unlikely boy from the city a reason to believe that even the loneliest souls could find home in each other's arms. The real lessons were only beginning. The sun rose higher, burning away the last wisps of storm clouds, and with it came the harsh reality of what they'd done, what they'd become to each other in the darkness. Caleb stood by the barn door, watching Jamie check the horses with practiced hands that no longer trembled with uncertainty. 3 weeks ago, those hands had fumbled with every task. Now they moved with confidence, with purpose. Caleb had done that, had transformed this soft city boy into something stronger, something capable. But somewhere in the teaching, in the long days and longer nights, he'd also transformed himself. The loneliness that had been his constant companion for 5 years had lifted, replaced by something far more dangerous. Something that made his chest ache when Jamie smiled. Something that made him count the hours until they could be alone again. The mare's doing better, Jamie said, approaching him with that easy stride he'd developed. The storm didn't spook her as bad as I thought. Good. Caleb's voice came out rougher than intended. You handled her well. A flush crept up Jamie's neck, and Caleb knew he was remembering exactly how he'd handled more than just the horse last night. The knowledge settled between them, heavy and sweet. Caleb, Jamie started, then stopped, eyes darting toward the bunkhouse where other ranch hands were beginning to stir. We should probably talk about... Not here. Caleb cut him off, voice low. Tonight, after everyone's asleep. My cabin. The promise in those words made Jamie's breath catch. Yes, sir. That sir went straight through Caleb like lightning. Even now, after everything they'd shared, Jamie still deferred to him. Still looked at him with those eyes that held equal parts respect and hunger. Dangerous. This was all so dangerous. But Caleb couldn't bring himself to care. The day dragged endlessly. Caleb worked the herd with mechanical precision, his mind miles away, trapped in memories of Jamie's gasps, his pleas, the way his body had responded to every touch. The other hands noticed his distraction, exchanging glances, but no one dared comment. Caleb's reputation for silence was well earned. Jamie worked the north fence line, visible in the distance, and Caleb found himself watching more than he should, watching the way the sun caught his hair, watching the confidence in every movement, watching and wanting and barely holding himself together. Boy's really shaping up, the foreman said, following Caleb's gaze. Surprised me, truth be told. Didn't think he'd last a week. He's stronger than he looks, Caleb muttered. That he is. You've been good for him. Real patient. Teaching him everything. The foreman's eyes were knowing. Too knowing. And Caleb felt his jaw tighten. Just doing my job. Sure you are. The old man spat tobacco into the dust. Just make sure it stays that way. Job, I mean. Boss finds out you're treating that boy as anything other than a ranch hand, there'll be hell to pay. The warning was clear. Caleb gave a curt nod, but inside, his gut twisted. He knew the risks. Knew what men like them faced if their truth was discovered. Knew that what had started in the storm last night could destroy them both if anyone found out. But when night finally fell, and he heard the soft knock on his cabin door, all those warnings evaporated like morning mist. Jamie stood in the doorway, freshly washed, hair still damp, wearing clean clothes that somehow made him look even younger, even more vulnerable. "Come in," Caleb said, stepping aside. Jamie entered, his eyes adjusting to the dim lamplight, taking in the sparse cabin. A bed, a table, a chair, nothing more. Caleb had never needed more, until now. "We need to set some rules," Caleb said, even as every part of him screamed to forget rules, to forget everything except the taste of Jamie's mouth. "Rules." Jamie turned to face him, confusion clear in his expression. "What happened last night?" Caleb forced the words out. "It can't happen again. Not like that. Not without understanding what it means." Hurt flashed across Jamie's face. "You regret it?" "No." The word came out fierce, more forceful than Caleb intended. He crossed the small space between them, his large hands framing Jamie's face with surprising gentleness. "I don't regret a damn second of it. But I won't be the man who takes advantage of you, who uses your inexperience against you." "You're not," Jamie whispered, his hands coming up to grip Caleb's wrists. "You're not using me. I want this. Want you. I've wanted it since the first day, even when I didn't understand what the wanting meant." The confession broke something open in Caleb's chest. "You don't know what you're asking for, what this life means. Two men like us, if anyone finds out. I know the risks." Jamie's voice was steady now, all uncertainty gone. "I know what could happen, but I also know I've never felt as alive as I did last night in your arms. As right. As real." Caleb closed his eyes, fighting against the tide of emotion threatening to sweep him away. "Jamie?" "Teach me," Jamie said again, the same words he'd whispered in the barn, but now they carried deeper meaning. "Teach me how to be what you need, how to handle everything you want to give me. I'm not afraid anymore." "You should be." Caleb's voice was strained. "I'm not a gentleman. What I want, what I need, it's more than you understand." "Then show me." Jamie pressed closer, his body fitting against Caleb's with perfect rightness. "Show me everything. Don't hold back because you think I'm too soft, too new. I'm stronger than you think." Caleb looked down at this impossible boy who had walked into his life 3 weeks ago and turned everything upside down, saw the determination burning in his eyes, the trust, the desire that matched his own, and surrendered. "All right," he said quietly, "but we do this my way. Slow, careful, and the moment you say stop, we stop, no matter what. I won't say stop. You might, when you understand what I'm offering, what I'm demanding." Jamie's lips curved into a smile that held no innocence. "Then I guess you'd better start teaching, sir." That word again. That perfect, dangerous word. Caleb's control, already frayed, snapped entirely. He pulled Jamie against him, claiming his mouth with a kiss that spoke of hunger held too long in check. Jamie melted into him with a soft sound that went straight to Caleb's core, his hands tangling in Caleb's shirt, pulling him closer, closer, never close enough. When they finally broke apart, both breathing hard, Caleb rested his forehead against Jamie's. "Last chance to walk away," he whispered. "Not a chance in hell," Jamie breathed back. The night that followed rewrote every definition Caleb had ever known about connection, about need, about the kind of intimacy that transcended simple physical release. He took his time, mapping every inch of Jamie's body with hands that trembled with restraint, learning what made him gasp, what made him arch, what made him beg in that broken voice that drove Caleb to the edge of madness. And Jamie, for all his inexperience, was a devastating quick study. His hands explored with growing confidence, finding all the places where Caleb's carefully constructed armor had weak spots, finding all the ways to make this giant of a man come undone. "You're perfect," Caleb whispered against Jamie's throat, feeling the rapid pulse beneath his lips. "So damn perfect." "Not perfect," Jamie gasped as Caleb's hands worked wonders that made stars explode behind his eyes. "Just yours. Only yours." The possessiveness in those words sent fire racing through Caleb's veins. "Say it again." "Yours," Jamie repeated, his voice breaking on the word. "I'm yours, Caleb. Whatever you want, however you want it. I'm yours." Caleb sealed the promise with another kiss, pouring every emotion he couldn't voice into the connection between them. And when Jamie finally shattered in his arms, crying out his name like a prayer, Caleb knew he was equally lost, equally claimed. They lay tangled together afterward, sweat-slicked and breathless, Jamie's head on Caleb's chest, listening to the thunder of his heartbeat slowly return to normal. "I didn't know it could be like that," Jamie said softly. "Didn't know anything could feel that overwhelming." Caleb's hand stroked through Jamie's damp hair. "Neither did I." Jamie lifted his head, eyes searching Caleb's face. "But you've been with—" "Not like this." Caleb cut him off. "Never like this. What we just shared, what you gave me." He struggled to find words for the enormity of it. "I've taken my pleasure before, quick and anonymous in dark places where no one asked names. But this, what we have, it's different. You're different." A smile bloomed across Jamie's face, radiant even in the dim lamplight. "Good. I want to be different. Want to be the only one who sees you like this." "You are." Caleb pulled him closer. "God help me, you are." They dozed fitfully, wrapped around each other. But as dawn approached, reality intruded once more. Jamie would need to return to the bunkhouse before the other hands woke, before questions were asked. "I hate this," Jamie muttered as he dressed, his movements reluctant. "Hate having to sneak around. Hate pretending you're nothing more than my foreman during the day." "I know." Caleb stood, pulling on his own clothes. "But it's the only way to keep you safe, to keep us both safe." Jamie crossed to him, rising on his toes to press a kiss to Caleb's jaw. "One day, maybe things will be different. Maybe we won't have to hide." Caleb wanted to believe it, wanted to imagine a world where two men could love openly without fear. But he'd seen too much, lived through too much, to trust in such impossible dreams. "Maybe," he said anyway, because Jamie deserved hope, even if Caleb had long since lost his own. Jamie slipped out as the first birds began to sing, and Caleb watched from the window as he made his way back to the bunkhouse, moving through the pre-dawn shadows like a ghost. The days that followed fell into a pattern. Long hours of work under the brutal sun, Caleb and Jamie maintaining careful distance, their interactions professional, appropriate. But beneath the surface, Electricity crackled every time their eyes met. Every accidental brush of hands, every quiet instruction that held layers of meaning only they understood. The other ranch hands noticed Jamie's transformation from soft city boy to capable worker, but they attributed it to good teaching, hard work, the simple reality of the frontier shaping a man. They didn't see the real truth, didn't see how Jamie bloomed under Caleb's attention like desert flowers after rain. And at night, when the bunkhouse fell silent, Jamie would slip through the darkness to Caleb's cabin, where they could finally drop their masks, where Caleb could worship this beautiful, impossible man who had somehow found all the broken pieces of his soul and made them whole again. "Tell me about before," Jamie asked one night, his head pillowed on Caleb's shoulder. "About what made you so afraid to let anyone close." Caleb was quiet for a long time, his fingers tracing patterns on Jamie's bare back. "There was someone, years ago. Another ranch, another life. What happened? We were discovered." The words came out flat, emotionless, but Jamie could hear the pain beneath them. "The ranch owner's son found us together. He told his father. There was a trial of sorts. They called it an abomination. Called us sinners." Jamie's hand tightened on Caleb's chest. "What did they do?" "My partner, his name was Thomas. They hung him." Caleb's voice cracked. "Made me watch. Said it was a lesson about the wages of sin. Then they beat me within an inch of my life and left me in the desert to die." "Oh God, Caleb." "I survived. Crawled to a mission. The priests there, they took me in, patched me up. Never asked questions. When I could walk again, I left. Came here. Swore I'd never let myself care about anyone again." Jamie pressed a kiss over Caleb's heart. "I'm sorry. I'm so sorry." "Don't be sorry. Just understand why I'm careful. Why I need you to be careful too. I can't." His voice broke. "I can't watch them hurt you. Can't survive losing you the way I lost Thomas." "You won't?" Jamie lifted his head, meeting Caleb's tortured gaze. "We'll be careful. We'll be smart. But Caleb, what we have, it's worth the risk. You're worth the risk." Caleb pulled him into a kiss that tasted of salt and sorrow and stubborn hope. And for the first time since Thomas's death, he let himself believe that maybe, just maybe, he deserved a second chance at happiness. The weeks turned into a month, then two. Summer heat gave way to autumn's cooling breath. Jamie no longer looked like a city boy playing at ranching. He'd been transformed entirely, his body lean and hard with muscle, his hands calloused and competent, his movements sure and confident. But it was the changes no one else could see that mattered most. The way he carried himself differently, the quiet strength that radiated from him, the knowledge in his eyes of what it meant to be truly known, truly claimed. Caleb watched these changes with equal parts pride and terror. Pride because he'd helped shape this magnificent creature. Terror because the more Jamie became his own man, the more he might realize he didn't need Caleb anymore. "Stop it," Jamie said one night, catching the doubt in Caleb's eyes. "Whatever you're thinking, whatever fear is eating at you, stop it." "You could leave," Caleb said quietly. "Could go anywhere, do anything. You don't need this ranch anymore. Don't need—" "You," Jamie's eyes flashed. "Don't need you? Is that what you think? You've grown so much, become so strong, you could—" "I could what? Leave the only man who's ever seen me? The only place I've ever felt like I belong?" Jamie grabbed Caleb's face, forcing him to meet his gaze. "I'm not going anywhere. Not now. Not ever. You're stuck with me, Caleb Ward. Better get used to it." The fierce declaration broke through Caleb's defenses. He pulled Jamie against him, burying his face in his neck. "I don't deserve you." "Probably not." Jamie's smile was gentle. "But you've got me anyway. All of me. For as long as you'll have me. Forever then." The word slipped out before Caleb could stop it, a promise he'd never thought he'd make again. Jamie's smile widened. "Forever. Sounds perfect." Outside, the autumn wind whispered through the canyon, carrying with it the promise of winter ahead. But inside Caleb's cabin, wrapped in each other's arms, two men found warmth that no season could diminish. The lessons had evolved beyond simple ranching skills. beyond even the physical connection they shared. They'd become lessons in trust, in vulnerability, in the courage it took to love when the world said such love was wrong. And Jamie, who had arrived as an uncertain boy, had learned them all, had surpassed every expectation, every hope. He'd learned to be strong, to be capable, to be exactly what Caleb needed. But more importantly, he'd taught Caleb something in return, had taught him that broken hearts could heal, that lonely souls could find home, that love, real love, was worth any risk. As dawn approached and Jamie prepared to slip back to the bunkhouse, Caleb caught his hand. "Thank you," he said quietly. "For what?" "For being brave enough to stay, for being strong enough to handle everything I've given you, for being you." Jamie's kiss was soft, sweet, filled with promise. "Thank you for teaching me, for showing me who I could become, for loving me." The word hung in the air between them, spoken aloud for the first time. Love. Simple and terrifying and absolutely true. "I do," Caleb whispered. "God help me, I do love you." "Then that's all we need," Jamie said. "Everything else, we'll figure out together." As Jamie disappeared into the pre-dawn darkness, Caleb stood at his window, watching until he was safely inside the bunkhouse. And for the first time in 5 years, he allowed himself to imagine a future. Not just survival, but a real life. With Jamie by his side, the real lessons, he realized, were still only beginning. But now he faced them without fear, with Jamie's strength to bolster his own, with love to light the way through whatever darkness lay ahead. And that made all the difference. Winter came to the prairie with teeth bared and claws extended. The first snow fell in early November, blanketing the ranch in white silence that muffled everything except the howling wind. The cattle huddled together for warmth, and the ranch hands spent long days ensuring the animals didn't freeze. Caleb and Jamie worked side by side, their breath forming clouds in the frigid air, their careful distance maintained even as their eyes spoke volumes the cold couldn't touch. 3 months since that first storm-soaked night in the barn, 3 months of secret meetings, stolen moments, a love that grew deeper with each passing day despite the danger, or perhaps because of it. "Storm's coming," the foreman announced one evening, his weathered face grim. "Big one. We need to move the herd to the south pasture, get them near the windbreaks before it hits." "How long do we have?" Caleb asked. "Day, maybe 2. This one's gonna be bad. Might lose some animals if we're not careful." That night, as Jamie slipped into Caleb's cabin, the urgency between them was different, sharper, edged with the knowledge that the coming storm might keep them apart for days. "I hate this," Jamie said, pressing close against Caleb's warmth. "Hate that we only have stolen hours, that I can't just stay here with you where I belong." Caleb's arms tightened around him. "I know, but it's safer this way, for both of us." "Is it though?" Jamie pulled back, meeting Caleb's eyes. "Some of the hands are starting to notice. The way I look at you when I think no one's watching. The way you find excuses to check my work. To stay close." Dread coiled in Caleb's stomach. "Who?" "Marcus, mostly. He made a comment yesterday. Asked if you were sweet on me." Jamie's laugh was bitter. Said it like a joke, but his eyes weren't joking. "Marcus, the newest hire, a drifter who'd shown up 6 weeks ago looking for winter work. He kept to himself mostly, but Caleb had noticed the way he watched everything, everyone. The way his gaze lingered too long on Jamie. "Stay away from him," Caleb said, his voice hard. "I do. But Caleb, what if... We'll be careful, more careful. After this storm passes, maybe you should request a bunk assignment farther from mine. Make it look like we've had some kind of falling out." Pain flashed across Jamie's face. "You want me to pretend I don't care about you?" "I want you to be safe." Caleb cupped Jamie's face, his large hands gentle despite the fear churning in his gut. "I want you alive and whole, even if it means acting like you mean nothing to me during the day. Because you mean everything, Jamie. Everything." Jamie's eyes shimmered with unshed tears. "This isn't fair. We shouldn't have to hide what we are. Shouldn't have to pretend this love is something shameful." "I know, but the world doesn't care about fair. It only cares about its rules, and we're breaking everyone." They made love that night with desperate intensity, as though they could somehow imprint themselves on each other's souls deeply enough that no storm, no danger, no cruel twist of fate could tear them apart. And when Jamie finally left just before dawn, Caleb stood at his window and watched him go with dread sitting heavy in his chest. Something was coming. He could feel it in his bones, in the electric tension of the air. The storm the foreman had warned about wasn't the only danger heading their way. The blizzard hit with apocalyptic fury. Snow fell so thick you couldn't see 3 feet ahead, wind screaming like a living thing, temperatures plunging so low that exposed skin froze in minutes. The ranch hands worked in shifts, battling the elements to keep the animals alive, to keep themselves alive. Caleb barely slept, driven by the need to protect the herd, protect the ranch, protect Jamie even though they couldn't acknowledge each other beyond professional necessity. He watched from a distance as Jamie proved himself again and again, working tirelessly despite the brutal conditions, never complaining, never faltering. Pride swelled in Caleb's chest. This was the man he'd helped shape, but also the man Jamie had always been underneath. Strong, resilient, magnificent. On the 3rd day of the storm, disaster struck. A section of the south fence collapsed under the weight of snow and wind, and a dozen head of cattle scattered into the white void. Without hesitation, Jamie mounted his horse and rode out after them, disappearing into the blizzard before anyone could stop him. Caleb's heart stopped. No. No. He was on his horse seconds later, ignoring the foreman's shouts to wait, to think, to not be a fool. Nothing mattered except finding Jamie before the storm claimed him. The world was white chaos, snow and wind obliterating everything. Caleb pushed his horse forward, following instinct more than sight, his voice raw from shouting Jamie's name into the uncaring storm. Time lost meaning. Minutes or hours passed in frozen hell, until finally, he saw a dark shape ahead. Jamie's horse, standing still, riderless. Terror unlike anything Caleb had ever known seized his heart. He dismounted, stumbling through the deep snow, and found Jamie crumpled against a drift, his face pale, his lips blue with cold. No, no, no. Caleb dropped to his knees, pulling Jamie into his arms. "Stay with me. Please, stay with me." Jamie's eyes fluttered open, unfocused. "Caleb, I'm here. I've got you." Caleb stripped off his heavy coat, wrapping it around Jamie's trembling body. "We're going home. Just hold on." He managed to get Jamie onto his horse, then climbed up behind him, keeping him pinned against his chest for warmth. The ride back was a nightmare, every second an eternity, Jamie's consciousness wavering in and out. When they finally reached the ranch, Caleb carried Jamie straight to his cabin, ignoring the shocked stares of the other hands. Let them stare. Let them wonder. Nothing mattered except getting Jamie warm, getting him safe. He stripped Jamie's frozen clothes off with shaking hands, wrapped him in every blanket he owned, built up the fire until the cabin blazed with heat. And then he held him, pressing his own body heat against Jamie's ice-cold skin, willing him to live, to fight, to come back. "Don't you dare leave me," Caleb whispered fiercely against Jamie's hair. "Not like this. Not when I finally found you. Fight, Jamie. Fight for us." Hours passed. The storm raged outside while Caleb kept vigil, monitoring Jamie's breathing, the gradual return of color to his face, the way his body slowly stopped shivering and started warming. When Jamie's eyes finally opened, clear and focused, Caleb nearly wept with relief. "Hey," Jamie croaked, his voice rough. "Hey yourself, you damn fool," Caleb's voice shook. "What were you thinking, riding out into that storm alone? The cattle, to hell with the cattle. You could have died, you almost—" Caleb's voice broke. He pressed his forehead against Jamie's. "You almost left me." "I'm sorry." Jamie's hand came up, weak but sure, to cup Caleb's face. "I'm sorry, I just wanted to prove myself. Wanted to show everyone I could handle anything." "You don't have anything to prove. Not to me, not to anyone." Caleb pulled back, meeting Jamie's eyes. "You're already more than I ever hoped for. More than I deserve." "Caleb," a knock at the door interrupted them. Caleb tensed but called out, "What?" The foreman's voice came through. "Boy gonna live?" "Yeah, he'll live." "Good. Boss wants to see you both when he's strong enough. Tomorrow morning. Dread settled in Caleb's stomach. Understood. After the footsteps retreated, Jamie struggled to sit up. The boss? Why would he want to see us? Caleb's jaw tightened. Because I carried you to my cabin instead of the bunkhouse. Because I've been in here with you for hours. Because I probably looked like a man in love when I was searching for you. Understanding dawned in Jamie's eyes, followed by fear. They know. They suspect. And suspicion is almost as dangerous as proof. Jamie's hand found Caleb's, fingers intertwining. What are we gonna do? I don't know. But whatever happens, we face it together. That night, they didn't make love. They simply held each other, drawing strength from their connection, preparing for the battle ahead. Because they both knew the morning would bring consequences. The only question was how severe. Dawn came gray and cold. The storm finally spent. Caleb helped Jamie dress, his hands lingering on every button, every touch potentially the last. They walked to the main house in silence, Jamie still weak but refusing to lean on Caleb where others might see. The boss, a hard man named Garrett Holloway who'd built his empire through sheer will and ruthlessness, sat behind his desk, like a judge preparing to pass sentence. Marcus stood in the corner, his expression satisfied, vindicated. Caleb's blood ran cold, so it had been Marcus who reported them. Marcus who'd been watching, waiting for proof. Mr. Ward, Holloway said, his voice neutral. I've received some disturbing allegations. Marcus here claims he's witnessed inappropriate behavior between you and the boy. Jamie, Caleb corrected, his voice hard. His name is Jamie Cordell. The boy's name is irrelevant. What matters is whether these allegations have merit. Silence stretched taut. Caleb could deny it. Could claim Marcus was lying, that there was nothing between them beyond a professional relationship. Could probably even convince Holloway, who valued Caleb's work ethic and skill. But it would mean denying Jamie, denying what they were to each other. And Caleb found he couldn't do it. Couldn't betray this love even to save his own skin. It's true, he said quietly. Everything Marcus suspects. It's all true. Jamie's sharp intake of breath was audible. Marcus's smirk widened. Holloway's expression hardened. You understand what you're confessing to? Holloway asked. I understand perfectly. Jamie and I have been involved since late summer. I love him. I won't apologize for that or deny it. Caleb, no, Jamie started, but Caleb cut him off with a look. Let me finish. He turned back to Holloway. Jamie's done nothing wrong. If you need to punish someone, punish me. But he stays. He's a good worker, the best I've trained. Whatever your opinion of what we are to each other, don't let it blind you to his value to this ranch. Holloway studied them both for a long moment. Then, surprisingly, he turned to Marcus. Leave us. But sir, I said leave. Marcus departed, his confusion evident. Once the door closed, Holloway leaned back in his chair. 20 years ago, he said quietly, I had a son, Jonathan. Good boy. Strong, smart, everything a father could want. When he was 19, he confessed to me that he loved another man. A ranch hand, not unlike yourself, Mr. Ward. Caleb's heart hammered. This wasn't the direction he'd expected. I reacted poorly, Holloway continued, his voice heavy with old regret. Told him it was a sin, an abomination. Threw the man off my land, and sent Jonathan to live with relatives back east, thinking distance and time would cure him. His laugh was bitter. 6 months later, I received a letter. Jonathan had thrown himself from a bridge. The man I'd driven away had done the same a week prior. Grief cracked through Holloway's stern facade. I learned then that love, in whatever form it takes, is precious, rare, and that destroying it in the name of righteousness only breeds death and regret. He stood, walking to the window. I won't make that mistake again. If you two care for each other, if this is real and not just... He waved a hand, unable to finish. It's real, Jamie spoke up, his voice clear and strong despite his lingering weakness. I love him. I'd die for him. Let's hope it doesn't come to that. Holloway turned back to them. Here's what's going to happen. Marcus will be paid out and sent on his way. I'll spread a story that I caught him stealing. As for you two, you'll have to be more careful. I can't protect you from the law or from every prejudiced man who rides through here. But on my land, under my roof, you have sanctuary. Understood? Caleb could barely process the words. Sir, don't thank me. Just don't make me regret this mercy. And Mr. Cordell? Holloway's gaze fixed on Jamie. You nearly died yesterday being reckless. If you're going to survive loving this man, if you're going to make a life together, you need to be smarter, braver, yes, but also smarter. Can you do that? Yes, sir, Jamie said firmly. Good. Now get out of my office before I change my mind. They stumbled out into the cold morning air, both in shock. It wasn't until they were halfway to Caleb's cabin that Jamie grabbed his arm. Did that really just happen? I think so. Caleb pulled him into a fierce embrace, not caring who saw. We're safe. We're actually safe. Jamie buried his face in Caleb's chest. When you confessed, when you didn't deny it, I thought, I know, but I couldn't lie, couldn't deny you, even if it meant losing everything. You could have lost your life. A life without you in it isn't worth living. Caleb tipped Jamie's face up, meeting his eyes. I learned that the hard way. I'm not making that mistake again. Their kiss was witnessed by at least 3 ranch hands, but for the first time, Caleb didn't care. The secret was out, but instead of destruction, they'd found unexpected grace. The months that followed brought changes. Marcus left, and Holloway's story about theft was believed. A new hand was hired, a quiet man who kept to himself and asked no uncomfortable questions. And slowly, carefully, Caleb and Jamie began to build a life that didn't require constant hiding. They still maintained separate bunks for appearances, but everyone knew Jamie spent most nights in Caleb's cabin. Some of the hands were uncomfortable with it, but Holloway's acceptance provided cover. Those who couldn't tolerate the situation moved on. Those who stayed learned to mind their own business. Winter deepened, then gradually released its grip. Spring came with the smell of new grass and the promise of renewal. And one evening, as they sat on Caleb's porch, watching the sunset paint the mountains in shades of gold and crimson, Jamie leaned against Caleb's shoulder. I've been thinking, Jamie said. Dangerous habit. Jamie elbowed him gently. I'm serious. I've been thinking about the future, about what comes next for us. Caleb's arm tightened around him. What do you want to come next? I want land of our own. A small ranch, maybe. Nothing huge but ours. A place where we don't have to answer to anyone about who we are or what we mean to each other. It was a dream Caleb had never let himself imagine. That takes money. More than either of us has. I know, but I've been saving my wages, every cent. And you've been here, what, 5 years? You must have something put away. Some, Caleb admitted. So we pool our resources. We work here another year, maybe 2, save everything we can. And then we find our own piece of land, build our own life. The hope in Jamie's voice was infectious, dangerous, beautiful. You really think we could do it? 2 men like us trying to run a ranch together? I think we can do anything together. Jamie turned to face him fully. Look how far we've already come. You found me dying and made me strong. I found you alone and gave you a reason to love again. Together we survived a blizzard, survived being discovered, survived everything the world threw at us. A ranch of our own? That's nothing compared to what we've already accomplished. Caleb looked at this man who had transformed his entire existence, who had taken a heart he thought was broken beyond repair and made it whole again. And he let himself believe in the impossible. All right, he said, we'll do it. We'll save, we'll plan, and when the time's right, we'll build our own future. Jamie's smile was radiant. Promise? Promise. Caleb sealed it with a kiss that tasted of hope and home and happy endings he'd never thought he'd deserve. The sun dipped below the horizon, and the first stars began to appear in the darkening sky. Somewhere in the distance, a coyote howled. The wind carried the scent of sage and possibility, and in that moment, everything was perfect. The journey to their own land hadn't been easy. 18 months of backbreaking work, saving every penny, researching land parcels, navigating territorial claims and homestead laws. But Holloway had helped, putting in a good word with the land office, vouching for their character when others might have questioned two unmarried men purchasing property together. They'd found the perfect piece 20 miles north, a valley sheltered by red cliffs with a natural spring and good grazing land. The price was fair, and when they'd signed the deed, Caleb had made a choice that surprised even himself. "Put both our names on it," he'd told the clerk. "Caleb and Jamie Ward, equal partners." The clerk had raised an eyebrow at two men with the same surname who weren't brothers, but he'd written it as instructed. And when Jamie had seen the deed, tears had streamed down his face. "Ward," he'd whispered, "you want me to take your name? Thought it was time you had a family name that meant something. That meant belonging." Caleb had pulled him close, not caring about the clerk's scandalized expression. "You're mine, Jamie. Have been since that first storm. Might as well make it official in the only way the law allows." They'd spent that entire winter building, working from dawn to dusk, sometimes beyond, raising walls and setting foundations. Other ranch hands from Holloway's spread came to help during their off hours, drawn by the promise of Jamie's cooking and Caleb's whiskey, staying because they believed in what these two men were trying to build. Even the foreman showed up one weekend, hammer in hand. "Figured you could use some expertise," he'd said gruffly. "Can't have you two building a barn that'll collapse in the first strong wind." The cabin took shape first. 2 rooms, like Caleb had promised, with a proper stone fireplace and windows that actually opened. Jamie insisted on painting the shutters blue, said it reminded him of the sky on the day he'd first arrived at Holloway's ranch. "The day my life really started," he'd explained, and Caleb had kissed him right there in front of the foreman and 3 ranch hands, too full of love to care who saw. The barn came next, larger than strictly necessary for their small herd, but Caleb was planning ahead, planning for growth, for a future that stretched beyond just survival, planning for the life Jamie had dared him to dream of. They moved in on a bright spring morning, their few possessions packed into a single wagon, stood in their doorway and looked out at land that was theirs, bought and paid for with sweat and sacrifice and love. 2 years later, on that same piece of land, their homestead had grown. The cabin had been expanded. The barn now housed 15 head of cattle and 4 horses. Fences stretched toward the horizon, enclosing good grazing land that was slowly making them prosperous. Caleb and Jamie Ward, the deed read. Partners in every sense of the word. They worked the land together, building their dream one fence post at a time. The work was hard, unforgiving, but they faced it side by side, each man's strength complementing the other's. Caleb still woke before dawn, old habits too ingrained to break, but now he woke to Jamie's warmth beside him, to the sound of his breathing, to the knowledge that he wasn't alone anymore. He'd make coffee while Jamie dressed, and they'd sit on their porch watching the sun paint the mountains gold, planning the day's work in comfortable silence. Some mornings, Jamie would catch Caleb staring at him with an expression of wonder that still hadn't faded, even after all this time. "What?" Jamie would ask, smiling. "Just can't believe you're real sometimes, that this is real." "Believe it?" Jamie would lean in, pressing a kiss to Caleb's jaw. "I'm as real as it gets, and I'm not going anywhere." They'd developed rhythms, patterns that felt like home. Caleb handled the heavy labor, the fence building and cattle wrangling that required brute strength. Jamie managed the books, the planning, the trades in town that required a softer touch and quicker mind. Together they made decisions about which calves to sell, which to keep for breeding, how to expand without overextending. The neighboring ranchers had accepted them, more or less. There were still those who wouldn't meet their eyes in town, who crossed the street rather than acknowledge them. But there were others who treated them fairly, who judged them by the quality of their cattle and the strength of their handshake rather than who they loved. Old Man Patterson, who owned the adjacent spread, had even become something of a friend. He'd lost his wife the previous winter and understood loneliness in a way few men could. "Don't care who you love," he'd said over whiskey one evening, sitting on their porch. Just care that you love, that you've got someone to come home to. That's what matters in this life. He'd taught them about water rights and grazing rotations, shared advice about dealing with predators and disease, and when wolves had threatened his herd, Caleb and Jamie had ridden over without being asked, spending 3 nights in the cold to protect Patterson's cattle like they were their own. The old man never forgot it, told everyone in town that the Ward boys were good neighbors, solid men, the kind you wanted at your back in a crisis. It didn't change everyone's minds, but it changed enough. Their second summer brought a drought that tested everything they'd built. The spring that had seemed so reliable began to slow, the grass turning brown earlier than usual. They dug deeper into the well, rationed water, watched their cattle grow lean despite every effort. "We might lose some," Jamie said one evening, voice heavy with worry, "if the rains don't come soon." Caleb pulled him close, feeling the tension in his shoulders. "We'll do what we can, save what we can, and if we lose some, we'll rebuild. We've survived worse." "Have we?" Jamie's voice cracked. "This ranch, it's everything we worked for. If we lose it, we won't lose it. And even if we did, we'd still have each other. That's what matters, Jamie. Not the land, not the cattle. Us." The rains finally came in late August, torrential and violent, filling the spring and turning the dry grass green again. They stood in the downpour, faces tilted to the sky, laughing with relief and joy and the pure exhilaration of survival. That night, soaked to the skin and muddy from dancing in the rain, they made love with the fierce intensity of people who'd stared disaster in the face and lived to tell about it. Who understood that every moment together was precious, hard-won, worth celebrating. Their third year brought prosperity. The herd grew healthy and strong, calves fetching good prices at market. They were able to hire a hand, a quiet young man named Thomas, who asked no questions and worked hard. Having an extra set of hands meant Caleb and Jamie could take occasional trips to town together, could spend an evening at the saloon like any other ranchers, could pretend for a few hours that they were just like everyone else. "You ever regret it?" Jamie asked one night, lying in Caleb's arms after they'd returned from town. "Choosing this life? Choosing me?" Caleb was quiet for a moment, gathering his thoughts. "Sometimes I think about how much simpler it would have been to be alone. No risk, no fear, no chance of losing someone I love." He felt Jamie stiffen and quickly continued. "But then I remember what that loneliness felt like, how empty every day was, how I was just going through motions, surviving but not living. And I realized that simple isn't the same as good. That safety isn't worth the price of happiness." He tilted Jamie's face up, meeting his eyes in the lamplight. "You made me come alive again, Jamie. Made me remember what it feels like to hope, to dream, to love. And no, I don't regret a single moment, not even the hard ones, especially not the hard ones, because they taught me just how strong we are together." Jamie's smile was tremulous. "I love you so much it scares me sometimes. The thought of losing you. You won't. We've got years ahead of us, decades if we're lucky, and I plan to spend every single day showing you exactly how much you mean to me." They held each other as the night deepened, listening to the familiar sounds of their ranch. The horses in the barn, the cattle lowing in the distance, the wind whispering through the canyon, all of it theirs, all of it home. And on quiet evenings, they sat on their porch and watched the sun set over land that was theirs, free and clear. "Still think you can handle all 13 inches? Caleb teased one evening, referencing the height difference that had seemed so overwhelming when they first met. But now the joke carried different weight, a reminder of how far they'd come, how much they'd grown together. Jamie laughed, the sound rich and full, no trace of the uncertain boy who'd arrived at Holloway's ranch 4 years ago. "I can handle everything you've got to give, and then some. Learned that lesson pretty thoroughly, if you recall. In fact, I seem to remember you being the one who needed a moment to catch his breath last night." Caleb grinned, pulling Jamie onto his lap despite his protests. "Getting cocky in your old age, are you?" "I'm 23, hardly old." "Ancient," Caleb murmured against his neck, "practically decrepit." Jamie's laughter turned into a soft moan as Caleb's hands found all the places that made him melt. "Caleb, Thomas could come back any minute. Thomas knows better than to come to the cabin after dark. Caleb's voice dropped lower. And I haven't properly appreciated you all day. That's far too long. What followed was slow and sweet, a reaffirmation of everything they'd built together. Not just the ranch, not just the life, but the connection that sustained them both. The trust that had been earned through years of choosing each other again and again, despite every obstacle. Later, as they lay tangled together in their bed, Jamie traced the scars on Caleb's chest. Some were old, from his time in the war and from Thomas's death. Others were newer, earned protecting this land they'd built together. "Do you ever think about him?" Jamie asked quietly. "Your Thomas?" Caleb was silent for a long moment. "Sometimes. Not as much as I used to. I think he'd be happy for me, for us. He always said I deserved love, even when I didn't believe it myself. I wish I could have met him. He would have liked you, would have seen in you what I see. The strength, the courage, the stubborn determination to survive despite everything." Jamie pressed a kiss over Caleb's heart. "You taught me that. Taught me I could be more than I thought possible." "No." Caleb's hand cupped Jamie's face. "You were always that person. I just gave you space to become who you already were." They drifted toward sleep, secure in each other's arms, in the home they'd built, in the future stretching ahead of them. Best student I ever taught. Best teacher I ever had. They sat in comfortable silence, hands intertwined, watching the day fade into night. The loneliness that had defined Caleb's existence for so long was a distant memory. The uncertainty that had plagued Jamie's early days had transformed into unshakable confidence. They'd found each other in a storm and forged something stronger than steel in the fires of adversity. They'd learned that love was worth fighting for, worth risking everything for, worth building a life around. And every lesson learned, every trial endured, had brought them to this moment, this place, this home. "I love you," Jamie said softly. "I love you too." Caleb's voice was rough with emotion, more than I ever thought possible. The stars emerged one by one, filling the vast sky with light, and beneath them, two men sat together, their love a quiet rebellion against a world that said such love couldn't exist. But it did exist. It thrived, it endured, and it always would. Some lessons, once learned, were never forgotten. The lesson of courage in the face of fear, the lesson of hope in the midst of despair, the lesson that even the loneliest souls could find home in each other's arms. These were the lessons that mattered. These were the truths that endured. And as night fell over their land, over their future, over their hard-won happiness, Caleb and Jamie held each other close and knew that every struggle had been worth it, because they had each other, and that was everything. The wind whispered through the canyon, carrying with it the promise of tomorrow. And for two men who had learned to love against all odds, tomorrow held nothing but possibility. Their story wasn't about the size difference, or the teaching, or even the physical connection they shared, though all those elements were part of the tapestry of their love. Their story was about finding courage when the world demanded cowardice, about choosing love when hate was easier, about building a life together despite every obstacle, every danger, every cruel twist of fate. It was a story of transformation, of two broken souls made whole by finding each other, of a lonely giant who learned to love again, and a frightened boy who discovered his own strength. And it was a story that would endure, passed down in whispers by those who understood that love, in all its forms, was worth celebrating, worth protecting, worth fighting for. As the moon rose high over the Ward Ranch, casting silver light across the land they'd built together, Caleb pulled Jamie into his arms one more time. "Thank you," he whispered. "For what?" "For being brave enough to stay that first night. For being strong enough to survive everything that came after. For loving me, despite all my broken pieces." Jamie's smile was soft, filled with a contentment that radiated from his very soul. You were never broken, just waiting for someone who could see the beauty in all your scars. They kissed beneath the stars, a promise and a prayer and a celebration of everything they'd overcome. And when they finally went inside, closing the door on the night, they carried with them the knowledge that love, real love, was the most powerful force in existence. It could survive storms and persecution and the cruelty of a world that didn't understand. It could transform fear into courage, loneliness into connection, despair into hope. It could take two unlikely souls and weave them together into something unbreakable. This was the final lesson, the one that mattered most. Love was worth every risk, every sacrifice, every moment of fear, because love was what made life worth living. And Caleb and Jamie had found it, nurtured it, and built an entire future around it. Their story was complete, not because it had ended, but because it had truly begun. Together they faced whatever tomorrow would bring. Together they built a life worth living. Together they proved that love always finds a way, even in the Wild West, even against impossible odds, even when the world says no. Love finds a way, always. The end.